Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by, and it's not that time of day, I'm just not having a good one. So this came early today. Doesn't happen often, but, and it probably just means an early night, nothing no different to that. Sort of emergency contact from my niece. Her daughter's having serious trouble doing her schoolwork at home on their little tablet. And they've got this laptop that hasn't been turned on for donkey years, and they tried to fire it up and it failed miserably. Just the twirly thing, you know, waiting and waiting. And they said, could I have a look at it? And I said, well, if it's a Windows based laptop, yes. If it's not, if it's Apple, Mac or whatever the other stuff is, I'm not getting near it with a barge pole. And anyway, I went round and got it. They stuck it out in the porch and stood well back, and I sort of got it and then got it home and sanitised it and washed my hands. It's getting silly, but it's got to be done. I mean, I got another box of wine delivered today because I can't do my home shop. So the only way I can get wine now is to order it online, a case at a time. So that's how it arrives. And literally carry the box in, get half a dozen bottles out, sanitise the bottles, put them in my rack, wash my hands. But there's not much comes into the house, so I haven't actually got to worry too much about incoming. And I don't go out much at all, because I'm told not to, and I don't much anyway. So me being stuck at home, or that's the expression that people use, is almost normal for me. It really isn't a big deal. Right, viewers' orchid question time. There aren't that many. Some of them I could elaborate for a long time on, but I won't because I need this relatively short today. I've just had to shut down all the kit. The extractor and the inlet were running, the fogger was on, the fans were on, and the temperature's going to climb in here. It's very warm outside. I just had to sit outside. I poured myself a glass of wine. I thought I'm going to take a break and chill and just go and sit in the sun. Point my face at the sun, and the warmth was really good. I won't leave it there as long as Insa did, but panda, yay, I've done it. Been there and done that. We used to have, when I lived in Swindon, I associated with quite a few other people that were interested in going to air shows. So during the summer months when the air shows were on, you went to air shows, and it was, in those days, it was called air show face. Because depending on which way the runway faces and which side you are, you're looking at planes in the air. You could have spent the whole day staring at the sky. Now if the sun was behind you, which is where those were the good air shows with the sun behind you, because they lit up the planes, you got some good photos and everything. But if the sun was that side, you ended up staring at the sun all day long and come back with a lobster job, you know. I have sympathies, I have done it. I went gliding once, and I was told, make sure you bring a hat. It's very exposed out on the airfield. There's no shelter, no tree, off for obvious reasons, because the planes bump into them. I said, yeah, I don't need a hat, I'll be fine. And basically, once you're in the glider, your canopy's over. Yeah, well, you can't burn through that. It's the same as you can't burn through glass. You can get hot, but you're not going to burn as such, because the wavelengths change. You don't get the necessary radiation to burn your skin. But while you're waiting and they're lining the planes up, you're stood in the sun, and it was breezy, so you sort of think there's not a problem. And in those days I had a soft top sports car, and I drove all the way home with the top down. The next day I think it would have been easier to just peel the whole face off like that down to the next layer. Boy did that hurt. So I appreciate the not getting to sleep. That'll last a day or two. Anyway, questions and answers. Tom Lemaine has asked, with Dendrobium Hancockii, how do the buds develop and how do you tell it's a bud? With difficulty, quite honestly. Am I going to be able to lift this up? Yeah, I suppose so. We'll see what we can do. Now, this is a very good Dendrobium Hancockii because it actually grows primulinum blooms. Well, they fall down from above. But yeah, it does distract a little bit when the buds from blooms from above fall down. Now this grows in a strange way because it looks like a bamboo bush, and it grows long arching canes that then branch out like that. These are natural branches. When these branches are young, they look just like the buds, but they're not. And all I can say is that on my plant, my canes don't branch at the time of year that the buds come out. So if you've got little bits sticking out, I've only got a couple of buds this year so far. I may get more, but down here are the only buds I've got. Just these few, or the only ones I can see, let's put it that way. So you have a habit of sneaking up on you on this plant. So I just spotted some scale on a leaf. Oh, they're dead. They are X scale. So what happened on this cane here was a couple of little green shoots started, and they look like branches. And then after a while, it's quite a slow process, you start to see the buds forming. Either a single one or doubles. These buds are quite a long way from actually opening because they're tiny at the moment. As I said, at the moment that's all I've got. That's a poor show. For the amount of space you take up, you need to do better than that. And then once it comes into bloom, I'll have to find somewhere up high to put it so we can see it. We had it up here last year, on here, virtually touching the roof. But it was the only place I could get it where we could see the blooms. But we're a way off yet. So yeah, that's how they develop. Slowly, and they look a little bit like a branching cane at first. Your plant might not be big enough to have started branching yet, I don't know. But mine is nowhere near a big plant. I've seen these nearly 2 meters tall and 1 meter wide. You know, literally a giant bush. I've also seen mass bloomings on plants only that tall. So it seems to be quite variable. So that's that one. This is an interesting one. I'll give you my thoughts, but if you can find a definitive answer, let me know. Larry Jones said, on dendrobiums, when you get those little nubbins, how do you tell if they're buds or kekes? Wait 2 weeks. There is no answer, because it will vary from plant to plant. I mean, if you take a nobile, the swellings are quite chunky. They're not fine pointy things, they're quite chunky. And they're going to look the same whether they're buds or kekes until they move away from the cane. So the simple answer is wait a fortnight. Just give it time. You'll tell. If it's a keke, then it will probably grow long and thin, and eventually some leaves will come out and it will grow roots. If it's buds, it'll be wider, fatter, and the buds will form as it moves away from the cane. So that's what I said. If you can tell at that nubbin stage, then let me know how you do it. There's no simple answer to that. And the other question, again from Larry, so like part 2, do new growths wait until blooms fade or drop? We're still on dendrobiums. Yes and no. Depends on the dendrobium. I mean, up here, pen on the floor, primulinum and aphyllum next to each other, both are starting to lose their blooms. The primulinum has already got a new growth 2 inches long. That started before the buds opened. So it wasn't even in bloom when the new growth started. And it's got 3 other new growths starting to push on. The aphyllum has nearly finished blooming, and it's just started a new growth. It's nothing more than just a pointy thing at the base of the plant. It's just started. Let's have a look. My nester over there, those buds haven't opened yet. The new growth at the top's nearly 3 inches long. So that new growth is growing substantially, and it hasn't even bloomed yet. The anosmum has no new growths at all, and the buds aren't open yet. So I'm just going for the more deciduous resting types. Now, although these aren't long cane ones, My Jenkinsii up there is in full bloom. There is not a hint of a new growth or any new roots on that. It's going to bloom and finish doing it before it even thinks about doing anything else. There aren't many other dendrobiums coming into bloom. Nobiles, well, I keep saying there aren't any. The chrysotoxums over there, it's probably got about 60 or 70 buds on it. Nobiles can do both. My prima donna over here is just coming to the end of its blooming, and it's just starting to break the sheaths at the base of the canes where the new growths will come out. So again, that's starting its new growths just as the blooms fade. Most nobiles are a bit like that. But again, not all. You know, the hybrids haven't only got nobile in them. To be called a nobile hybrid, somewhere back in there it goes back to nobile the species. Like Highlander, there can be only one. But it's been hybridized in so many shapes and forms that you may get what's called a nobile hybrid, but a bit of it over here has got all sorts of other stuff in it, like unicum and various other things that will mix in quite naturally with the nobile set. So you end up with a nobile hybrid that's got other stuff in it. That could have an influence on how it grows and at what point it pushes its new growth out. So no definitive answer. Elaine Riley asked what orchids shouldn't be mounted. Terrestrials, it's a good start. They grow in the dirt, yeah. So no dirt orchids on mounts. And then we go on to the epiphytes. Some epiphytes are bordering on terrestrials. Some of the Paphiopedilums grow on the ground in forests, in the leaf litter and that. So they're not deep in the dirt as such, but they are growing on the ground. They're not really true epiphytes. They're a bit somewhere in between. And then you've got the rock growers. They'll grow mounted, but some of them don't like it. There's probably something to do with the water on the rocks. There's an element of rock dissolving going on, and some of those elements go into the orchid from the rock, and without them they don't do as well because they've evolved to use them. But apart from that, if it's an epiphyte, it should grow mounted. Simply is that simple as that. But then we have to talk about you growing them mounted, not any old bod, but you. Where are you growing them mounted? Have you got high air humidity? Can you be there to water as regularly as they need it? Yeah? How often's that, I hear somebody saying? You'll get shot. How many times have I said you cannot define a frequency for watering? It's based on your temperatures, yeah? What an orchid is growing in and how dry it fasts out. How fast it dries out. And that's before I've even finished the wine. But yes, environmental factors dramatically affect watering frequency. If you can't keep up with that, you're better off using pots. Now some orchids just grow better mounted. They just do. And if you have to put those in a pot, take care. I'll give you one. Well, not give you, but show you one. That fundamentally is an oncidium. Okay, it's a Tolumnia, but it is basically was once called an oncidium. Yeah? They grow on little tiny twigs. You very rarely find these on larger branches or tree trunks or anything. And a lot of the orchids that grow on those branches and tree trunks grow there because their roots are in the moss and stuff and the other plants that have got roots and debris and things. So they got their roots in something even though they're growing on bark. Yeah? These don't. These grow on little tiny twigs with nothing else there. So you put these in a pot, they're not happy. But they are happy if you put them in a pot with a suitable media that doesn't hold water for any length of time, like the rocks, the pebbles, bits of charcoal, large chunky pieces of bark that don't soak up much water. Broken up clay pots in a little clay pot, they'll grow on that. But the expression is grow on, not in. So some orchids just do best mounted. because it's naturally how they grow, and they're not as tolerant as some others. Some are. So, all epiphytes can be mounted, but whether they are successful or not will depend on you being able to look after them in a manner that suits them, keeping them hydrated at suitable intervals, not letting them stay dry for any length of time at all in the growing season, and monitoring them in the winter when they're not growing much if you've got lower temperatures. If you don't get lower temperatures in the winter, then you're going to have to keep watering them, aren't you? And your resting dendrobiums are not going to be happy because they need to chill down. So that's a sort of answer. Kirk Eubanks asked a question that has no answer again. I get a lot of these questions. It's probably because people have tried to look them up and not got an answer. Well, where do you think I'm going to get the answer then? Well, some of it's experience, yes, but Kirk Eubanks said, asked, why do Cattleyas produce blind sheaths? And a simple answer, which to me is relatively obvious, is because they are borderline having enough strength and energy and stored nutrients to be able to push up a spike, create buds and open blooms and possibly maintain a fragrance. It takes up a lot of the plant's resources to enable them to do that. So the fit, healthy ones don't tend to produce the blind sheaths. The ones that have possibly been repotted in the not too distant past, possibly as a bulb was maturing, about to form its sheath, and it got repotted and all the roots got disturbed, and the plant's stopping and thinking, yeah, I'm struggling a bit here, we're not getting enough in at the bottom end, perhaps we won't bloom this time. Yeah? I mean, it is said that an orchid may throw out a spike as it dies, as a last resort, and it will use every last bit of its remaining energy, which it can't spare, to push up a spike to try and create seed. I've never seen that happen, but then I try not to let mine get in that state in the first place. But yes, a blind sheath will happen when a plant is maturing for the first time, and this is the first bulb it's ever had that was big enough to produce a spike. But there's not enough backup there, so it's ready but not quite. And at other times it will be because it's had major disturbance in its life not far behind maturing that bulb. But fundamentally it normally means that it has an underlying sort of feeling, not that plants feel, that it's not going to succeed, so it doesn't bother. That sort of thing. Mark Pullen, last question now. It's getting flipping hot out here. It's all the kit's off. We're starting to get a bit warm. We don't get dribbly, I'm not that sort of person, but I am getting warm. It needs to get a lot hotter than this before I need to take my shirt off. And it frightens the kids anyway, we just don't do it nowadays. It's the same with the shorts, the legs just frighten the kids, it's just not worth it. Right, Mark Pullen asked, old Cattleya bulbs. He had a situation where, I didn't go into it, but one of his older canes on one of his Cattleyas fell off while he was watering it, or came off. It was probably detached a while ago and just you hadn't twigged it. But nonetheless, a detached old pseudobulb on a Cattleya. Can they grow? Quite honestly, any back bulb can grow. But first, an initial thing to consider is how long it's going to take before that can produce a blooming sized plant from an old cane or bulb that's probably desiccated and got zero roots. So you have to ask yourself, how long is it going to take to recover into a state where it's got some roots and can start producing a new growth? That could be a year. And then that new growth's got to mature, and it's probably going to have to produce another couple before it gets to blooming size. And quite a few plants only do one a year. So you have to bear that in mind. You're almost putting the plant in a state that a seedling is in, as far as getting going is concerned. But if you want to have a go at back bulbs, I mean, cymbidiums are done that way all the time because some of the crosses are rare and what went into them has been lost. So the only, propagation really, because there's some orchids don't clone. They can't use the merry-clone process. So back bulbs are a brilliant way of getting some new plants. And you can take quite old shriveled leafless bulbs off a cymbidium and they'll grow, but they take a long time to get going. Dendrobiums less so, because they have most of them have a base. And effectively, to have an old cane on a dendrobium, you've actually got a division. It's not an old cane really, it's a division. You've divided the base of the plant. But nonetheless, the best way I've found, not that I do it very often, but I used to, is to get a tall, thin container. And quite honestly, what's quite good for this is the bottles of squash that you get, the plastic bottles of squash. Sort of 1 litre or 2 litre bottles. They're tall and quite thin. You cut the top off so that you've got a nice open top, and then make some holes in the bottom to let excess water out. Put some sphagnum moss in there and keep that moist at all times. It must not dry out. And then just stand your plant on top of that moss. Clean up the old roots, make it tidy, and make sure it's in contact with that sphagnum moss. The idea of the long thin tube that they're standing in is humidity, given that that moss will be giving off creating a humid atmosphere in a long tall container. And they may well root. Some people use the spag and bag method, which is basically the same sort of thing. You're basically getting a polythene bag, a sealed bag with no air holes at all, something that can be sealed tight, one of those that you do that thing, zip thing along the top, or tie it, whatever. And then they put their sphagnum moss in, and they put the base of their plant in the sphagnum moss that's moist, not soggy, not dripping wet, just moist, that's all it needs to be. And then the trick, if you're going to do the bag method, is to blow in it and blow it up. First of all, you're adding carbon dioxide in, which is good stuff for the plant because you're breathing it out, and you're adding moisture, your breath, and then seal it in. And don't get it anywhere near the sunlight. All recovering plants should stay out of really bright light. They don't need it. They've got enough stress to go on with without trying to cope with bright light. So it can be done with old Cattleya bulbs. It's nothing more than a division at the end of the day. But they always say with a division, if you want it to grow pretty quick, it ought to have 3 or 4 bulbs. So one is going to take a long time. But it can be done. Depends how patient you are, and it could be how precious the plant is. Because sometimes you'll get rot at the front end of a plant, and the only bit that's not rotten is the oldest bit. It might not even have any leaves on. And you cut all the rotting off, the bacterial type infections that go soggy, you've got to get them off. And you're left with next to nothing. And that's all you've got. And it might be precious to you, so you've got to give it a go. So that's that. And that is they. So I've got my eye on that laptop up there that's desperately trying to work out what Windows updates it needs to do. The laptop was last used in 2015, in whatever the 9th month is of 2015. That's the last time that the updates software was run, and it hasn't been logged on since, otherwise it would have automatically tried to update, because it's set to auto. Everything on this thing is set to automatically, no manual intervention at all. I'm the complete opposite. I can't stand automatic functions, I like to have control. But most people run it that way, I don't. So I'm just wondering how long it's going to take to decide which updates it needs, because Windows misnames things. It says, oh, you have a cumulative update, which in theory means you don't need all the ones behind it. Yes, you flipping well do. It needs to go back, because it basically needs the sequence to take place. Some it will skip, some of the lightweight ones, but most of the major ones it needs to be done in order. So you just got to flipping do them. Cumulative update to me means you run this one and you don't need anything else. That's the logic, but that's not how it works. Anyway, it'd be quite interesting to see how long it takes to decide which updates it's going to do, and then how long it actually takes to do them. Oh, the poor little thing. I mean, it's pretty old. It's running Windows Vista, whatever the hell that is. I don't remember going through that. I must have skipped that one. I think I went from 3.1 to XP, and then with all the rumours going round about what followed on from Windows XP, I waited. I waited a long time before I let it fly and got up to the as recent as I could get. But Windows Vista, I've heard of it, but I've certainly never been anywhere near it. But it's old, basically. So all the software within it is going to be old. It's not going to be the way I know it. But nonetheless, it's functional, I'm sure. And we'll let it run. It'll probably run all night trying to do these updates, but it can just sit there and get on with it. As long as it doesn't need intervention from me, then it can just get on with it. Anyway, that's a little bit of a... I don't call it fun because it sounds like it's a necessity. Somebody getting on with their schoolwork is pretty important stuff, and if this helps, I'm willing to give it a good go. And if I can get that updated as far as Windows is concerned, I've done the antivirus and did that first. I've done several other things that it insisted on doing that I wouldn't have bothered with, and then I'll probably run the tidy routine and the defrag, because I doubt if they've ever been done. That should get it as good as it can be without doing a real tidy up, which is it's personal. Do I need these files? Do I need this piece of software? I know I loaded it once, but I used it once and have never used it since. Get rid of it. If you've got an older computer or laptop or anything like that, get rid of the clutter and it will run as best as it can. Which in this case is not going to be brilliant. But if it at least runs and helps little Tegan with her schoolwork, then good on it. So I'll give it a go. And I will see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. I'll finish my wine now and get this kit back on. It's boiling out. What is it out here? 27. Right, let's get that down for a start.